Today we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. We've talked about how to solve by graphing and factoring, and those are two ways. The third way is solving by the quadratic formula. This formula right here is the quadratic formula. When you're given a quadratic equation, you have three variables that are represented in the quadratic formula. You have an a value, a b value, and a c value. The a value, once your quadratic equation is set equal to 0, the a value is the number in front of x squared. So our a value is 1. Our b value is the number in front of x, and the c value is the number, the constant, the number that's by itself. Okay, so the quadratic formula is negative b, your solution x, equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c divided by 2a. So here I've plugged in all the numbers the way I want you guys to plug them in or to write it out first. It's a negative b, so I have a negative and then in parentheses 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 5 squared minus 4 times a times c, so minus 4 times 1, that was my a value, times 6, that's my c value, divided by 2 times 1. Okay, so from there, what you do next is the first thing you do, a negative 5, negative times 5 is negative 5, plus or minus the square root. We want to simplify what's inside the square root here. So instead of writing it out, all those numbers, you can simplify that. One way you can do it, you can plug it into your calculator. So I could do when you're plugging it in your calculator, you want to make sure to use parentheses. If you don't, when you plug in negative numbers, sometimes you get the wrong answer. So there's a 5 squared minus a subtraction sign, not a negative sign, a subtraction sign, minus 4 times 1 times 6. When you plug that in, notice I didn't plug in the square root, I just plugged in those numbers. When I plug that in, I get 1. So I'm taking the square root of 1. 5 squared is 25 minus 4 times 1 times 6. 4 times 1 times 6 is 24. So if 25 minus 24 is, yes, 1. 2 times 1 is 2. Okay. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to simplify the square root. So if you will continue writing this problem up here, the square root of 1 is 1. So we have a negative 5 plus or minus 1 divided by 2. Now that plus or minus is where we're going to get two solutions. We're going to get one solution when we add the top and then divide it by 2. We're going to get another solution when we subtract the top and divide it by 2. So the first solution is when we add the top. So I'm going to draw an arrow up and I'm going to add it. So I'm going to negative 5 plus 1 is a negative 4 divided by 2. Okay, what's a negative 4 divided by 2? It's a negative 2. So one of our solutions for this quadratic equation is x equals negative 2. The other solution is what happens when you subtract the numerator. So I have a negative 5 minus 1. That's a negative 6 divided by 2. Negative 6 divided by 2 is a negative 3. So that's my other solution. Okay. That's how you solve the quadratic formula. That's one example. So the first steps to use the quadratic formula, the first thing you're going to do is plug in values for a, b, and c, and you want to use parentheses. If you don't use parentheses when you deal with negative numbers and you plug them into your calculator, you will most likely get the wrong answer. So after you plug in values, you want to simplify the square root and the numbers in the denominator. So I simplified the square root and I did 2 times 1. Okay. After that, there's two different things you could do. You can divide the numerator by the denominator. We'll look at some examples like that. Or sometimes you can break apart the addition, subtraction sign, and simplify. So that's what we did at this step. We broke apart this adding, subtracting sign. One adding, one subtracting, and we got two solutions there. So the first thing you want to do when you're looking at a quadratic equation is make sure it's equal to 0. This one is equal to 16, so we would like to make it equal 0. We want to put it in standard form, so I'm going to subtract 16 from both sides. I get an x squared plus 6x minus 16 equals 0. Once it equals 0, you can figure out what a, b, and c are. A is going to equal 1. In this case, b is the number in front of x, so that's 6. And then c is our negative 16. From there, you want to plug in your values for a, b, and c into the quadratic formula. So I'm always going to have x equals, okay, and then we have a negative b plus or minus a square root. So a negative b, so a negative, and then in parentheses 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 6 squared minus 4 times a times c, which is negative 16, divided by 2 times a. Okay. From there, you simplify what's inside the square root. When you plug it into your calculator or when you do it in your head, we're not calculating the square root yet because we want to look at that. We're going to look at that later. So I'm going to do a 6 squared minus 4, and then in parentheses 1, and then in parentheses a negative 16. Don't forget your negative. If you forget a negative, you'll obviously get the wrong answer, okay? A negative 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 6 is 100, okay? So I get a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 100 divided by 2. What we want to do there is see if you can simplify the square root. What's the square root of 100? It's 10, so I get a negative 6 plus or minus 10 divided by 2. From there, since I can combine 6 and 10, I'm going to add it, a negative 6 plus 10, and then I'm going to subtract it, a negative 6 minus 10. So negative 6 plus 10 is 4, and then divided by 2. Negative 6 minus 10 is a negative 16 divided by 2. Okay, what is 4 divided by 2? It's 2, so one of your solutions is x equals 2. What is negative 16 divided by 2? It's a negative 8. So the other solution is negative 8. Okay, we're going to talk about the type of roots later. So we'll pause on that, talk about the type of roots later. From here, you can go ahead and try this, pause the video, try this on your own, and then come back and see if you get the right answer. A is 2, B is 25, C is 33, yet x is equal to a negative b, so a negative 25 plus or minus the square root of 25 squared minus 4 times a, which in this case is 2, times c, which is 33, all over 2 times a, which is 2. From there, you plug this into your calculator. You should get a negative, x equals negative 25 plus or minus the square root of 361. If you do not get 361, that means you typed in something wrong here. You want to double check what that is. 2 times 2 is 4. From here, you want to simplify your square root. So you get x equals a negative 25 plus or minus. You want to check what is the square root of 361. If it comes down to a nice easy number, it keeps the quadratic formulas, it keeps our solutions pretty. So the square root of 361, if you did that in your calculator, you'll get 19 divided by 4. So we're going to split the numerator. We're going to add 25 and negative 25 plus 19, and then we're going to do negative 25 minus 19. When you do negative 25 plus 19, you get a negative 6, then divided by 4. Okay, what is negative 6 over 4 reduced to? A negative 3 over 2. So that's one of our solutions. X equals a negative 3 over 2. What happens when you subtract negative 25 minus 19. If you do that in your calculator, you'll get a negative 44, or do that in your head, okay? So you got a negative 44 divided by 4 is a negative 11. So another solution is x equals negative 11. Again, the type of roots, we'll talk about that later. Okay, let's try some more. It's already equal to 0. You have your a. You can tell your a value, your b value, and your c value. A in this case is 1, b is negative 16, c is 64. Do x equals a negative b, a negative 16, which will turn into a positive, we'll see that, plus or minus the square root of negative 16 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 64, divided by 2 times a, which is 1. Okay. Now this is a good example of why it's important to use parentheses. If you were to plug in, say, negative 16 squared, okay, if you plug it in like that, negative 16 squared should be a positive number because a negative times a negative is a positive. But when I plug it into my calculator gives me a negative 256 because your calculator squares the 16 and then tacks on the negative. So if you want your calculator to square the whole negative 16, you have to put it in parentheses. You have to do a negative 16 squared. When you do negative 16 squared, you get a positive 256, which is correct. A negative times a negative is a positive. If you do not put it in parentheses, it will not get the right answer. So we're going to plug in this whole thing into our calculator. We got a negative 16 squared minus 4 times 1 times 64. Nice, everything's in parentheses. When you calculate that, it gives you 0. So I have x equals a negative 16, so that means a positive 16, plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 2 times 1 is 2. What's the square root of 0? It's 0. So we got 16 plus or minus 0 divided by 2. If I add 0 to 16, does it change 16? No. If I subtract 0 from 16, does it change 16? No. So what ends up happening, instead of having two different answers, we have one answer, which is 16 divided by 2, which is 8. So this is one solution. If you were to graph this quadratic equation and plug it in your calculator, you should get a parabola that only touches the x-axis once because it only has one solution. Okay, that's how those two are related. Try D on your own and see if you get what I get. Again, the first thing you need to look at is negative 34. It's not equal to 0. It's equal to negative 34x. So we need to move that over to the other side. So we need to add 34x to both sides. So we get an x squared plus 34x plus 289 equals 0. Okay. You know that a is equal to 1, b is equal to 34, c is equal to 289. We got x equals a negative b, so a negative 34, plus or minus the square root of 34 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 289, all over 2 times a, which is 1. Okay. You plug that into your calculator, what's underneath the square root. You get 34 squared minus 4 times 1 times 289. You get 0. Okay. So what we're going to do here is we got x equals a negative 34 plus or minus the square root of 0 divided by 2. Negative 34, the square root of 0 is 0. 0 won't change it, so we won't have two solutions. Instead, we'll have one, and it'll be whatever 34 divided by 2 is. What is 34 divided by 2? It's 17, and it's a negative 34 divided by positive 2, so our solution is a negative 17. Okay. We will pause here and pick up the second part afterwards.